Okay, so we're back for another deep dive. And you guys sent in a ton of stuff on this LA wildfire. It's honestly kind of terrifying, but also like super fascinating. I'm glad you're here to help me go through all this stuff. It seems like wildfires are just getting, I don't know, more and more common. They're definitely getting worse. I mean, before we get into like the really detailed stuff, can you give us the rundown on what happened with this LA fire? Like, how bad was it?
Well, this one was really interesting because it was in the city, like right in the neighborhoods, not just out in the forest or something. The sources don't say exactly how many acres burned, but thousands of people had to evacuate. So it wasn't just like trees and stuff. This fire really directly affected a lot of people.
Yeah, you're right. It's totally different when it's in the city like that. And the
Uh,
news footage was just awful. But let's get past just what it looked like and talk about why it happened. Was this just bad luck, or is there something else going on?
It's almost never just bad luck. Our sources talk about a few different things that caused this fire, and a lot of these things are just prettily happening more and more with all these wildfires. First, you've got the dry conditions. California has been in a drought for a while, and that makes everything really easy to burn. And then on top of that, you've got the Santa Ana winds. Those are these crazy strong winds that come from the mountains. They're super dry, and they can turn a tiny fire into a huge one really fast.
So dry conditions plus strong winds. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. But were those the only causes, or did people have something to do with it?
That's a really important question. The sources don't say exactly what started this fire, but they do talk about something we're seeing more and more. Climate change is making these fires way more likely. Higher temperatures and longer droughts create what they call tinderbox conditions, which basically means it's super easy for a fire to start and then spread really quickly. But climate change is like the big picture. There's also the immediate cause. Sometimes it's an accident, sometimes someone is careless, and sometimes it's arson. So people definitely play a role.
Okay, so we've got a better idea of why this happened, both with this specific fire and just the bigger problem of climate change. But what about fighting this fire? How did they even start to control something like this? Was it just a ton of firefighters, or is there technology involved now, too?
You'd be surprised how much technology is used now. It's not just brave people with hoses anymore. This fire, they use some really high-tech stuff, like drones with infrared cameras, to map out where the fire was going. That helps them decide where to send people and equipment. And they're even using AI now, artificial intelligence. They have programs that analyze weather and the terrain and how fires usually behave to try to predict where the fire will go next. It's called predictive modeling, and it's really important for knowing when to evacuate people and where to send the firefighters.
Wow, that's incredible how technology has changed even firefighting. But it's still got to be super dangerous no matter what kind of gadgets they have. I mean, these people are risking their lives to protect us.
Oh, absolutely. And when a fire is moving towards houses and businesses, that creates all kinds of problems. They have to deal with narrow streets and protect buildings
Hmm.
and work with other emergency responders. It takes an incredible amount of coordination.
Okay, so we've covered what happened, why it happened, and how they fought the fire. But what about after the fire is out? What are the long-term effects of something like this? Not just for the environment, but for people in LA.
Well, this is where it gets really serious. There's obviously a lot of environmental damage, habitat loss,
Mhm.
air pollution, and the risk of mudslides later. But the
Yeah.
effect on people is often even worse. Think about the families who lost their homes, the businesses that were destroyed, and the trauma of going through something like this. Those impacts can last for years, even decades.
It's just heartbreaking to think about losing your home, being forced to move. It's not just about rebuilding buildings, it's about rebuilding your whole life.
Right, and then there's the financial side of it, which can be huge. The cost of putting out the fire, the cost of rebuilding,
Yeah.
and all the lost business and income. It's a massive financial burden.
So someone listening to this might be thinking, okay, this is interesting, but what does it mean for me? Yeah. You know, I don't live in LA.
That's a great question. And it's something we should all be asking ourselves. The truth is, we all have a part to play in preventing these fires, especially as climate change is making them worse. It starts with simple things like being careful with fire and clearing brush away from your house. It's called defensible space. You should clear everything within 100 feet of your house. And just be super careful with anything that could cause a spark.
That's a good point. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by how big this problem is, but even small things can make a difference.
Absolutely. And the first step is being informed, understanding the science behind these fires, what causes them, and how we can prevent them. That gives you power, it helps you make good choices, and support policies that address climate change and forest management.
That's a great way to put it. This fire in LA was a real wake-up call. It shows how powerful nature can be and the challenges we're facing with climate change. But it also shows how resilient people can be. The firefighters who risked their lives, the communities that helped each other out, and everyone working to rebuild and learn from what happened. So before we finish this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What can you do to make your community safer from fires? What steps can you take, on your own or with your neighbors, to get ready for a wildfire and make it less likely to happen? It's a conversation we all need to be having. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, stay safe and stay informed.